In 2006, I spent a day with Barack Obama. He was a U.S. Senator at the time. He didn't like a couple of things that I had written about him and some of the positions that he had taken, so he gave me a call, invited me to come spend a day with him. I wrote it up into an article, big article for The Nation magazine in 2006 called Mr. Obama Goes to Washington. And through a series of interviews with Barack Obama in 2006, we got onto the topic of healthcare and how he sees healthcare and healthcare reform moving forward. Remember, this is back in 2006. And there is a clear philosophical question now that the Supreme Court is raising about whether private insurance companies and whether the government can force private insurance companies to be between us and our physicians. And this topic actually came up in my discussion with Barack Obama. We have the full audio, which has never been released before, on our website right now, Sirota.am760.net, of what Barack Obama said about the question of the centrality of private insurers in the healthcare system. Only a brief line of it got into the article about the Nation in the Nation magazine because it was a piece about all sorts of different issues. Obviously, it wasn't clear at that point he was going to be president of the United States. But we're going to play this audio for you, and I want you to listen carefully to it. Specifically, listen for the phrase legitimate interests, because I think this gives us about the most accurate idea of how this White House will react to a Supreme Court ruling that potentially undermines the existing health care bill. It also gives us some insight into why the existing health care bill is so organized around empowering, strengthening the private insurance industry and not creating a system like every other industrialized country on earth, a system of single payer where the government is the single payer of health care, essentially Medicare for all. So this is an AM 760 exclusive. These are tapes that have never been released before of Barack Obama. We have a link on our website, Sirota.am760.net, if you want to listen to it there. We're going to play the whole clip for you. And this is part of a discussion about single-payer health care. I'd asked Senator Obama about where he was in his support, his previous support for single-payer. Listen to this.
It might be the best way if you started completely from scratch, if you had no legacies, right? The question is, let's just take a real simple example. Everybody who supports single-payer health care says, look at all this money we would be saving from insurance and paperwork. Well, that represents, what, $1 million, $2 million, 3 million jobs of people who are, working at Blue Cross Blue Shield or Kaiser or what have you. What are we doing with them? Where are we employing them? Do we expect them to just sort of sit by the wayside? And because some of those people, those aren't wealthy people. The executives may be, but a lot of those folks are making $30,000-$40,000 a year. So we have to take into account how do we transition from where we're at now to a place where we've got universal health care. So when you ask, is it a political problem? It's not political in the sense of,
can you get it passed?
Can you get it passed? It's political in the most profound sense of does it take into account all the interests, legitimate interests that are represented? There are a whole bunch of illegitimate interests defending the status quo in the healthcare system. But everybody's embedded in an existing system. And how do you get from A to Z? That so then I think let's say Mitt Romney in Massachusetts just imposed a different model for the state using mandates. So he takes Medicare and Medicaid. He looks at who is not. He then mandates coverage for everybody. Those who can't afford it or aren't paying for their employer, they subsidize. which leaves the insurance companies intact. And, you know, I mean, it sort of works within the existing system. Now, it's too early to look at that experiment and say that that's a model that is either going to work in Massachusetts or could ever work at the federal level. Because at some level, it depends on federal subsidies, Medicare and the Medicaid system. But if it worked, then I would be happy to embrace it, regardless of whose idea it is, because the bottom line is you'd have a bunch of working families who don't have health insurance right now who have health insurance. So I guess my point is this: I am agnostic in terms of the models that solve these problems. If the only way to solve a problem is structural institutional change, then I will be for structural institutional change. If I think that we can achieve those same goals within the existing institutions, then I'm going to try to do that because I think it's going to be easier to do, less disruptive, less costly,
because I
and
think
less painful.
So there was Barack Obama in 2006, and I think there are some very important points that come out of this as we move forward this week after the Supreme Court ruling. First of all, it gives you a sense of exactly why ultimately President Obama's health care bill became a bill about strengthening the insurance companies. Barack Obama believes that insurance companies are, quote, legitimate interests. That's his quote, legitimate interests that are represented, that need to be represented in any discussion of health care. Gives you a sense of why the White House opposed a public option that would challenge the private insurance companies. And I think moving forward, and this is the key point, if the Supreme Court eviscerates, invalidates the health care bill, I think this is a disturbing warning that this president does not believe that we can have a system that doesn't integrally involve private insurance companies. That what's going to happen this week, and we'll discuss it as it goes on this week, you will see the Supreme Court rule, and you will see a big debate over what the president, what the administration, what the Congress should do coming back to the issue of health care. And it's very important to understand that this is a person who believes that health care should be managed by private insurance corporations. That's what that quote says. That he believes private insurance companies are, quote, legitimate interests who need to be represented. Now, I think there's a good chance that if the Supreme Court invalidates the individual mandate, there will be a renewed push for single payer, for Medicare for everybody. And that is good news. But I think it's a mistake to assume that the Obama administration, which put the insurance industry's agenda item into the health care bill from the beginning, that individual mandate written by the insurance companies, which in that bill gives huge subsidies to those insurers. I think it's a mistake to assume that if there is a renewed push for Medicare for all, that Barack Obama will be supportive of it. Because as early as 2006, having just entered the United States Congress, he was already insisting that private insurance corporations, for-profit insurance corporations, must be at the center of health care. We have a link on our website, Sirota.am760.net, to that never-before-been-aired audio of Barack Obama in 2006. You can hear it there. I also found it fascinating. And this is the one line that did make it into my Nation magazine article. Did you notice that he said there's all this paperwork and all this waste in the current system, but we need to... He says that represents 1 to 3 million jobs of people. Did you notice that part? I couldn't, but that was the part. That's why I made it into that article. Oh, there's a lot of waste and abuse and paperwork in the existing system. But hey, that paperwork represents 3 million jobs. So I'm not sure we should get rid of it. It's like, dude, are you kidding me? We ought to keep paperwork and waste happening because it happens to employ people. Why don't we employ those people in something that's far more productive?